Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a cowboy, a gunslinger, or some steely-eyed drifter romanticised by dime novels and whiskey ads. You're something far more disposable. You're a Chinese labourer in the American West, shipped in by the thousands, worked until your bones splintered, and discarded the moment you became less efficient than a mule. You'll swing the pick, haul the stone, dig the grave, and none of it will belong to you, not even your name. Before the frost settles into your boots and the dynamite dust clogs your lungs, do me one favour. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing who's tuning in from around the world. If you'd like early access to more of these slow, suffocating walks through historical oblivion, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You don't arrive with a suitcase or a welcome. You arrive with a number, one among thousands, pressed shoulder to shoulder in the hull of a ship that smells like boiled cabbage, urine, and regret. The crossing from Guangdong is not romantic. It is long, cold, and loud. A floating coffin stacked with the hopeful, the desperate, and the lied to. You do not remember the exact day you left. Time dissolved somewhere between the first bowl of spoiled rice and the moment a man near you stopped breathing, and no one made room for the body. By the time the California coast drags itself over the horizon, you're too tired to be grateful. Your legs shake when you stand. Your skin peels from salt. Your name is still yours, but it won't be for long. The docks of San Francisco greet you with noise, shouts in English, curses in Cantonese, and the low groan of wooden carts hauling people like produce. The smell is worse than the ship. Dead fish, animal dung, smoke, sweat, and an undercurrent of something sourer, the stink of people who live without welcome. You squint through the fog, hoping to see something bright, something human, but instead you're pointed at by a boy with orange hair who yells something with a laugh. You do not know the words, but you know what a laugh like that means. The port agent doesn't ask your name. He waves you along with a stick. You shuffle forward with the others, like animals through a pen. Your papers are inspected by a man who looks at you the way one might look at a crate of fruit, checking for bruises. You don't speak English. He doesn't care. He jots something on a clipboard, maybe your age, maybe a guess, and tags your arm with a smear of chalk. The mark tells him which group you belong to. It tells you nothing. You try to ask a question in your dialect, but the man shouts over you and calls for the next. You're pushed forward by the crowd. Your belongings, a bundle wrapped in cloth containing a second shirt, a comb, and a coin sewn into the hem, bump against your thigh as you walk. You keep your head down. You've already seen two men pulled aside for speaking too loudly. Chinatown is not the home you hoped for. It's a tangle of alleyways, tar paper shacks, and windows nailed shut. Laundry hangs like wilted flags. Children crouch in doorways with swollen eyes. You find lodging with 20 others in a room that sleeps 8. The walls sweat in the night. Rats chew through your bedding. Still, there's a kind of relief in being among your own. You hear your language again. Not just words, but rhythm. Familiar songs hummed under breath. Jokes that make your mouth twitch before you remember not to smile. But it doesn't last. You're not here to stay. You're here to be moved. Within days, you're packed onto a wagon headed east, toward the mountains, toward the cold. Your feet dangle over the side as you rock in rhythm with the road. No one tells you where you're going. The foreman, a white man with a long moustache and a face like an old boot, shouts at intervals, but his words are swallowed by the creak of wheels and the wind in your ears. You understand only the tone. Hurry up. Sit still. Shut up. The men around you pass a dented bottle of rice wine and murmur about the work. Some heard it's in Nevada. Some say Utah. Others believe it's all a lie, and you'll end up digging your own grave. No one knows for sure, but the pay, they say, is better than sewing in a sweatshop, better than starving back home. And that's the kind of math that passes for hope these days. The landscape unfolds slowly, then brutally. The green hills vanish, the flat valleys rise into jagged ridges. You pass through towns where the people stop and stare, not with curiosity, but with the slack-jawed look of someone spotting a disease. A boy throws a stone at the wagon. It hits your leg, you don't flinch. A woman spits in the dust as you pass. You try not to meet her eyes. The signs are everywhere. No Chinaman allowed. White labour only. Coolie go home. You can't read them, but someone translates. You don't laugh. It's not funny. It's just absurd to be so unwanted in a place that needs you so badly it shipped you across an ocean to break your back. At one station, you're unloaded like sacks of flour. The foreman calls a roll, mangling every name until they bleed. He doesn't wait for corrections. He doesn't need to. You're a body, not a person. You'll answer to whatever he decides to call you, or you'll be punished. One man refuses. He says his real name clearly and slowly. The foreman narrows his eyes, walks over, and slaps him hard enough to draw blood. "You're Charlie now," he says. The man nods. He is Charlie. You, perhaps, are John, or Chin, or something less coherent. It doesn't matter. You practice answering to it anyway. It's easier that way. From there, it's boots on gravel. You're handed a sack of supplies, pick, shovel, blanket, tin bowl. You're told to walk. The trail to the worksite winds through thin forests and over rocky slopes, the elevation climbing with every hour. Your breath shortens, your shoulders ache from the load. The others walk in silence, conserving strength. A man behind you wheezes wetly. Another trips and is helped up without a word. You stop once to piss against a tree. A nearby bird startles and flies away, the only living thing not looking at you with suspicion. The camp appears without warning, a clearing of canvas tents pitched in uneven rows beside a river that smells of rotting leaves and mule dung. Smoke drifts lazily from cook fires. A few men squat over bowls of rice, their faces expressionless. Others unload supplies from a cart. You're directed to a tent that barely fits 6 men, though it's meant for 8. There's a pile of straw in the corner. That's your bed. You toss your bundle down and sit, trying not to breathe too deeply. Everything smells like damp socks and old blood. Welcome home. Later, a translator comes, a Chinese man in Western clothes with a stern face, and an accent that suggests he's forgotten how to speak like you. He explains the rules. Work starts at dawn, ends when the foreman says so. Meals are your responsibility. Water must be boiled. Tools must be returned. Injuries are not compensated. Complaints are not tolerated. The railroad pays $30 a month, but fees will be deducted. Don't argue. Don't fight. Don't leave. You nod. Everyone nods. There's no point in asking what happens if you do leave. The wilderness will swallow you faster than the company ever could. That night, you lie on the straw, staring at the canvas ceiling. Someone is snoring beside you. Someone is weeping quietly, like he thinks no one will notice. You clutch your bundle to your chest and close your eyes, willing yourself to sleep, but the cold seeps in through the floor. Your toes curl against it. The ache in your shoulders has settled into your bones. You hear the wind outside, sharp and constant, like it's trying to peel the tent away piece by piece. And somewhere beyond it all, you hear a train whistle. Not the one you'll ride, but the one you'll build. The first thing to die is your voice. Not literally. Your throat still works, your tongue still curls around words. But it doesn't matter. Language is a tool. And out here, yours is the wrong one. You speak Cantonese or Hakka or Toisanese, depending on where you came from and how much of your village you carried with you. But none of that means anything now. English is the currency here. And you don't have a penny of it. Your bosses don't speak your language. They don't care to. The white workers don't either. The only thing they recognise is whether you follow orders, not that they bother to explain them. Orders are shouted in short bursts, half words mixed with spittle and impatience. When you hesitate, they shout louder. And if you move the wrong way, you'll be met with the back of a hand or the toe of a boot. You begin to understand in small humiliating increments. A grunt paired with a finger jab means lift this. A sharp whistle followed by a pointed arm means over there. When they yell something with urgency, it means you're already late. You learn quickly because mistakes are painful, not just to your body, although yes, your body collects those lessons like bruises, but to your dignity. The shame of not understanding becomes its own kind of ache, lodged somewhere just behind your ribs. You try to mimic what the others do, watching closely for patterns. Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't. Either way, no one slows down to help. There are no translations here, only consequences. In camp, you meet men from neighbouring villages, men who understand your dialect only slightly better than the white foremen do. Everyone speaks a little differently, but you all understand the basics of survival. Boil water, don't touch another man's food. Keep your head down. Eventually, a pidgin forms. Not a language exactly, but a system of nods, gestures, and half-swallowed phrases that get the job done. A raised eyebrow might mean, "Is that yours?" A scoff and a shoulder turn means, "Not anymore." You begin to communicate in shrugs, in silences, in the little eye movements that say everything words no longer can. The signs nailed to posts along the worksite don't help. They're in English, long blocky text that might as well be written in smoke. One has a skull and crossbones painted on it, but no one explains what it means until a man touches the barrel beside it and burns his hand through the skin. Another sign has the word powder stenciled on it, which you later learn refers to explosives. The irony is not lost on you. They warn you of danger with words you cannot read, then blame you for the accident. Afterward, a supervisor lectures the camp for 30 minutes about safety procedures. Not a word of it is translated. It might as well be birdsong. Even when someone tries to help, it's a kind of performance. A white foreman once crouched beside you and spoke slowly, as if enunciating each syllable would make it magically understandable. "You go there, you carry rock." He gestures with exaggerated flailing, like he's trying to teach a dog how to dance. You nod, not because you understand, but because it seems expected. He smiles like a teacher rewarding a clever child, then turns away before seeing that you're still frozen in place. You carry the rock anyway. It's the only safe bet. Over time, you come to fear your own voice, not just what it says, but what it might provoke. One man, young, quick-tempered, muttered something under his breath after a foreman shoved him. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten, he just muttered, low and angry, in a language the foreman couldn't possibly understand. It didn't matter. The foreman heard the tone. That was enough. The next day, the man was assigned to dynamite duty. The day after that, they buried what was left of him under a cairn of rocks. You help stack the stones. You do not ask why. You already know. Names fare no better than speech. Yours is butchered early, split into syllables that aren't meant to be split, reshuffled by mouths that don't care to get it right. The foreman calls you ching. A cook calls you chin. Another worker simply whistles to get your attention. You answer to all of them. Eventually, you stop offering corrections. They wouldn't stick anyway. Your name becomes whatever someone shouts loudest. You start to forget how it sounds in your mother's voice. The syllables dry up in your mouth like old tea leaves. The white workers in nearby camps make no effort to bridge the gap. They speak loudly, as if volume is a substitute for clarity. They use your presence as a joke, mimicking your accent, pulling their eyes back with their fingers and bowing mockingly. They laugh in groups, not at anything you've done, but at your existence. You learn not to look at them directly. They don't want conversation. They want a target. One worker asks if you can even understand him. You don't answer. He laughs and says, "Didn't think so." That apparently is the punchline. Among your own, you speak sparingly. The less said, the safer. You've learned to mistrust the air itself. It carries words where they don't belong. You whisper in the mornings, murmur in the evenings, and say nothing during meals. Even your laughter, when it does come, is brief and quiet, almost embarrassed. It's not that you have nothing to say, it's that language feels heavy now, like something with sharp edges. You've seen men cut themselves open with the wrong phrase. The translator, the one who visits occasionally, in his polished boots and stiff collar, doesn't help much. He speaks your dialect like someone reading a poem he doesn't believe in. He offers instructions, never kindness. When you ask questions, he frowns as if your curiosity is inconvenient. You begin to suspect he resents you, or perhaps he's afraid you'll remind him of who he used to be. Either way, he keeps his answers short. You eventually stop asking. There are moments, strange flickering moments, when someone tries to be kind. A cook once gave you an extra portion of rice without charging. A younger white worker once pointed at a pile of gravel, then at a spot farther up the hill, clearly trying to show you where to carry it. He didn't mock, he didn't shout, just pointed, nodded, and said, "There." You nodded back, but even that brief exchange felt fragile, like a truce that could shatter if either of you looked at it too hard. You never spoke to him again. In place of language, your body becomes your communicator. You move with efficiency, gesture with care, and rely on the small pantomimes of daily survival. A raised eyebrow can ask a question. A flick of the wrist can end an argument. You become fluent in gestures, in silences, in the long pause between one shouted command and the next. You become an expert at reading the air, who's angry, who's tired, who's about to lash out. It's not a skill you're proud of. It's just necessary. And eventually, you stop trying to speak at all. Not in protest, not in despair, but in exhaustion. It's easier to nod than to explain. Easier to lift a stone than ask where it goes. Easier to be silent than to be reminded that no one here wants to hear your voice anyway. You still talk in your dreams sometimes. You wake with a phrase on your lips, your mother's name, or a joke you used to tell. But even those are fading, replaced by the crunch of boots, the clatter of tools, and the distant bark of orders you no longer need translated to understand. When you're spoken to, you answer. When you're not, you vanish. That's the rhythm now. Not survival, invisibility. Speech is a risk. Silence is a shield. And with that shield drawn tightly around you, you are led down a rocky path to your new assignment. Another camp. Another stretch of wilderness that needs breaking. Another set of voices you won't understand. The wind howls across the plain, carrying words you'll never speak again. Privacy, like dignity, is a memory. There is nowhere to wash in peace, nowhere to dress in silence. Men piss against the same trees they hang their laundry on. Someone has dug a latrine trench behind the cook tent, but no one has managed to make it smell less like regret. In the mornings, you rise to the stink of sweat and mildew, and at night, you fall asleep to the sounds of snoring, muttering, scratching, and that same relentless coughing, always the coughing. It starts in one throat and echoes in others, like a call and response hymn to tuberculosis. You try not to breathe too deeply. It doesn't help. There are no women here, none. Not in the tents, not in the cookhouse, not in the blurred edge of the forest where you half expect to find something resembling civilization. What's left is a brittle kind of masculine silence, the kind that forms between men who have nothing left to prove and too much left to survive. You speak when spoken to. You nod instead of greeting. You sit shoulder to shoulder, but feel oceans apart. Some have wives back in China. Most don't talk about them. A few men keep paper charms tucked into their bedding, scraps inked with the names of loved ones, pressed flat as protection. You suspect those charms are doing more work than anyone here dares admit. Dryness is a luxury. Your boots stay wet for days at a time, even when it doesn't rain. The moisture seeps up from the earth. like the mountain itself, is sweating out your presence. You hang your socks near the fire at night, only to wake and find them somehow damper than before. Your shirt never quite loses its chill. The canvas of the tent collects beads of water that drip with mocking regularity onto your face as you sleep. You no longer bother brushing the mould off your collar. What's the point? It comes back like a debt. At the heart of camp is the cook tent, the only place with consistent heat, if you don't mind sharing it with smoke and shouting. Each ethnic group cooks for themselves, and you're responsible for your own meals. Rice, dried fish, maybe a few scraps of vegetables if someone managed to trade with a peddler in town. The rice arrives in sacks, hard, stony grains that take forever to soften. Firewood is always in short supply, and boiling water becomes a chore rationed by patience. The men bicker over the pot, jostle for heat, and eye one another's portions with the quiet vigilance of people who've been cheated too many times. No one starves exactly, but no one eats enough to feel full. Hunger becomes a kind of companion. You stop noticing it until it goes away, which is worse because it only goes away when you're too sick to feel it. Cleanliness is aspirational. There is a barrel of water at the edge of camp meant for washing, but by the time 10 men have dipped their hands and feet in it, the barrel is more mud than bath. You scrub your face with a rag and convince yourself it's an improvement. Lice are a daily ritual, picked from seams, sleeves, collars, and then flicked into the fire or crushed between fingernails. You joke silently that the lice are your closest companions here. At least they stick with you. At least they don't forget your name. At night, the cold becomes a living thing. It slithers into your bedding, curls around your spine, stiffens your joints. You wake with your fingers curled like claws, your jaw aching from clenching in your sleep. If the wind picks up, it cuts through the tent like a knife. You've seen frost form on the inside canvas. Tiny white veins snaking downward as if the cold is trying to write its name into your lungs. You huddle closer to the other men, not for comfort but for warmth. No one objects, no one speaks. Warmth is the only intimacy anyone here can still afford. The tents never stop moving. Every gust of wind makes them groan. Every shift of weight outside sends a tremor through the floor. You sleep lightly, if at all. The sound of boots crunching outside becomes a trigger. Maybe it's the foreman coming to drag someone out early. Maybe it's a fight. Maybe someone has died. The line between rest and alertness dissolves. You wake often, unsure of what stirred you, and find that your heart is pounding anyway. Occasionally, men vanish. You don't know where they go. One day, they're huddled in the tent beside you, and the next day, their bedding is empty. No explanation is given. You hear rumours, injury, reassignment, desertion, but no one confirms anything. A man named Jew left his pickaxe behind. Another, called Sam by the white men, left his shoes. You learn not to ask questions. You learn to notice absence as its own form of language. A missing man is a warning, not a story. Fires are rare. The wood is scarce and the smoke draws attention. When someone manages to build a fire, it becomes a magnet. Men gather in silence, staring into it like it's the last connection to anything warm or human. You don't speak much around the fire. The flames crackle, and someone might hum a song under their breath, a lullaby they can't quite finish. You know better than to request another verse. Nothing here lasts long enough for choruses. There's no place to go when the day ends. No break room, no tavern, no real escape. You could walk into the forest, but the cold would snap your bones within hours. The town is too far. Even if you made it, the signs posted in the windows would remind you that you're not welcome. A few men talk about saving up enough to leave, to find work in San Francisco, or maybe even go home. You nod when they speak, but you don't believe them. You've seen how fast dreams shrivel in this air. The coughing gets worse. One man wraps a cloth over his mouth, hoping it will keep him from infecting the others. It doesn't. the same sound starts cropping up from other tents. The coughing becomes part of the landscape, like the wind or the crunch of gravel. You start measuring nights by how many men wake themselves up with it. You count fewer jokes, fewer songs, fewer footsteps. Hope becomes a superstition. When it rains, the camp turns to sludge. The tents leak. The cooking fire refuses to light. Your clothes take days to dry, and the smell of mildew rises from your sleeves like smoke. You step carefully to avoid slipping, but it doesn't help. You fall anyway. Everyone does. No one offers a hand up. Helping someone else is just another way to get pulled down with them. You stop expecting comfort. You stop expecting rest. Sleep becomes something you chase, not something you receive. Every hour you close your eyes feels like a theft from the mountain, a fragile rebellion against the inevitability of waking. When you do sleep, it's shallow, haunted by the same sounds that fill your days. Boots on dirt, coughing in the dark, the shuffle of someone too tired to move, but too afraid to stay still. The days don't begin, they just resume. The moment you wake, or more accurately, stop pretending you're asleep, the rhythm of labour slams back into place, like a hammer against iron. You stretch only enough to make sure nothing's frozen. Your boots are still damp. Your breath fogs in front of your face. You tie your scarf with trembling fingers and shoulder your tools without ceremony. There is no breakfast, just lukewarm water and a half-stale rice ball that crumbles in your hand as you walk. The air smells of frost and burnt pine, and something deeper, sourer, the breath of men who've long since stopped hoping the day will bring anything different. The work site is a gash carved into the mountainside, jagged and unstable. You're not laying tracks yet. You're preparing the earth to accept them, which means blasting, hacking, and moving thousands of tons of rock using little more than muscle, metal, and pain. There are no machines here. Machinery is for important jobs. You, on the other hand, are cheap, replaceable, and expendable in a way steam engines are not. Mules are valuable. They need rest, they cost money, and they bite. You, however, are none of those things. So when there's a boulder too large to lift, you're handed a pry bar and told to be clever. When the cart's too heavy to push, you lean harder. When something breaks, a wheel, a bone, you do not call for help. You either fix it or you keep going. The tools are worn, the shovels splinter, the pickaxes wobble in their handles, wheelbarrows groan under every load, their wheels warped from frost and overuse. Gloves are a luxury you can't afford, and even if you had them, they'd be soaked through within hours. Your palms blister, then tear, then callous. Your shoulders ache by mid-morning. By noon, they burn. By afternoon, they go numb. That's usually a relief, right up until the pain returns, deeper and angrier, like it resents being ignored. You swing your pick in rhythm, like a metronome of misery. Each strike sends a jolt from the handle to your spine. The rock barely gives. The foreman paces behind the line, barking orders, sometimes at you, sometimes at no one in particular. When someone moves too slowly, he yells. When someone moves too quickly and drops something, he yells louder. His voice cuts through the clang of metal and the crunch of gravel like a knife, not sharp but serrated and designed to irritate more than wound. You quickly learn to time your movements to his presence. Work steadily, but not quickly. Look busy, but not so busy you stand out. Avoid eye contact. Always avoid eye contact. Lunch, when it comes, is not a meal, but a pause. You gather with the other Chinese labourers in the shadow of a pine stump, shielding your food from the wind. A dented pot of boiled rice, a few scraps of dried fish, maybe a preserved vegetable if someone remembered to barter with the cook. You eat without talking. The only sound is chewing and the occasional crack of joints stiff from work. The white workers further up the slope get meat, potatoes, warm food served from a wagon. One of them laughs, loudly, pointing in your direction. You don't look up. You already know the joke is about you, and it isn't funny. After lunch, it's dynamite. The word alone is enough to make your hands shake. Not from fear exactly, but from the anticipation of failure. You don't light the fuses, that's a white man's job, but you drill the holes, deep and steady, into the face of the mountain. Sometimes the powder is old, sometimes the fuse is damp, sometimes the detonation is early, and sometimes the rock doesn't give. It just spits the explosion back into the tunnel, like the mountain's reminding you who's really in charge. You've seen what it does to men. You've seen blood on the walls, limbs half attached. One man caught a flying splinter of granite in the throat, didn't make a sound, just dropped like a sack of wet clothes and bled into the gravel while the foreman screamed at someone else to take his place. No one stops, ever. Not when someone gets hurt, not when the weather turns, not even when the tunnel collapses. There's no time for grief, no space for hesitation. Time is money, and you, as you're reminded daily, are cheaper than both. If you fall behind, they replace you. If you get injured, they replace you. If you die, someone kicks your body aside and finishes the job you started. It's not personal, it's arithmetic. The ground beneath your feet shifts constantly. One misstep can twist an ankle or send you tumbling down the slope into a pile of sharp stones. Your back hurts more from lifting than from being hit, but both kinds of pain blur together eventually. You walk hunched, you shuffle more than you step. Your knees crack every time you bend. You don't notice anymore. Pain becomes background noise, a low hum beneath the clanging of iron and the grunts of men pretending not to break. The sun beats down in summer, merciless and dry. The air fills with dust kicked up by boots and shovels, clogging your nostrils, coating your tongue, turning your sweat into a gritty paste. You cough it up in the evenings, thick black phlegm that tastes like regret. In winter, the wind is sharp enough to peel skin. Your hands go numb within minutes. You keep swinging your pick anyway, hoping the motion brings warmth. It doesn't. The handle slips from your fingers. Someone behind you swears. You retrieve it with shaking hands, and no one says a word. They don't need to. Everyone understands. You lose track of time. Not just hours, whole days blur together. Work ends when the foreman disappears, not when the sun sets. Sometimes he forgets. Sometimes he doesn't care. You keep digging until your fingers bleed, and when you stop, it's not because you're finished. It's because your body refuses to keep going. Your arms fall limp, your legs give out. You drop the pick and lean against a rock, panting through clenched teeth. The worst part isn't the pain. It's the silence that follows. The moment when the noise stops and the stillness rushes in, heavy, accusing. You look at what you've done. The pile of stones moved from one side of the slope to the other, and you feel nothing. No pride, no relief, just exhaustion. The knowledge that tomorrow the pile will be different. The location will change. The pain will not. And still you don't stop. The sun sinks below the ridgeline, bathing the valley in gold that feels more like mockery than beauty. You're too tired to appreciate it. You keep moving, slower now, your steps dragging, your shadow long and fragile across the gravel. The white workers are already gone. The foreman lingers, counting tools. When he finally leaves, you wait a moment longer, just in case he comes back to yell about something you missed. You shoulder your pick, now heavier than it was this morning, and limp back toward camp. Your palms sting. Your back groans. One finger won't stop twitching. You look down and see blood crusted beneath your nails. You don't remember when that happened. You don't care. You pass a marker on the trail, a rock someone stacked like a headstone. No name, just a pile of stones beside the path, carefully balanced. You nod once and keep walking. Tomorrow will be worse, it always is. After 12 hours of lifting, digging and bleeding, you return to camp with a hunger that feels less like an appetite and more like a sickness. It lives in your ribs, in the hollow below your stomach, in the back of your throat where bile sometimes bubbles up from the effort of pretending you're fine. But here, hunger is not something you cure. It's something you manage, like the cold, like the pain, like the gnawing knowledge that everything inside your body is gradually being converted into the labour that makes someone else rich. And for all of that sacrifice, you don't even get a meal handed to you. You have to make your own. There is no cook waiting with a hot bowl, no communal stew pot bubbling beside a crackling fire. Instead, there's a collection of dented pots, bent ladles, and battered woks that live in a corner of camp near a pit lined with stones. The wood is damp. The matches are unreliable. The tools are shared but not cleaned. If you want to eat, you have to compete. Not for food itself, but for the chance to cook it before your fingers go too numb to light a flame. Sometimes there's a line. Sometimes there's a scuffle. Sometimes the fire simply refuses to catch and men sit in the dark chewing cold rice and convincing themselves it's fine. Your meals are whatever you carried in or whatever was delivered in the latest shipment, assuming none of it was stolen en route, spoiled from the damp, or borrowed by another starving man. Most nights that means rice, always rice, sometimes a piece of dried fish with its head still on, looking up at you, like it also wants to escape. On lucky days, there's a pickled vegetable or sliver of tofu that somehow survived the journey. You've seen men cry over a stolen radish. You've also seen men beaten for stealing one. Food is sacred, not because it tastes good, but because it's the last thing that feels like a choice. You rinse the rice twice and boil it with shaking hands, once for the dirt, twice to make sure the water won't poison you. The camp's water barrels are filled from a nearby stream, technically fresh, practically suspect. You've seen the upstream runoff, the animal droppings, the slush of mud that turns clear water brown after every rain. You boil everything now, even when the fire barely burns. The effort is worth it. You've already watched one man collapse from dysentery, eyes bulging and lips cracked, as his body rejected everything he'd swallowed for the last 2 days. No one knew what to do. The translator shrugged. The white overseer said nothing. The man died curled beside the latrine, holding his stomach and moaning like a child. You stir your rice with the same chopsticks you use for everything. Eating, cooking, pointing. They're worn smooth now. The tips are dark from soot. You try not to notice how your hands tremble as you eat. That's just fatigue, you tell yourself. Not malnutrition. Not hunger masquerading as survival. A few grains fall into the dirt. You almost bend to pick them up, then stop yourself. Not out of pride, out of fear that if you start eating off the ground, you won't stop. There's a man beside you who always eats in silence, eyes closed, as if he's somewhere else. You envy him. There's another who chews like it's a punishment, staring into the fire with a scowl that never softens. Most of the men in your tent say little during meals. Speech costs energy. Energy costs food. And food is always, always in short supply. You learn to savour texture, the resistance of undercooked rice, the slight crunch of dried scallion, the rubbery tug of a preserved mushroom. Flavours are less important than temperature. Hot means safe, cold means risk. The air around the cooking area is always thick with competing smells, the sharp salt of fermented fish, the earthy sweetness of boiled rice, the acrid tang of burnt wood, the sour rot of spilled broth left too long in the dirt. Occasionally, a waft of something else passes through. Beef, onion, garlic, carried on the breeze from the white workers' camp. You turn your head instinctively towards it. You're not the only one. Every nose lifts slightly, every expression tightens. Their food smells like a different world. The white workers don't cook their own meals. They have hired cooks, white men with aprons and fire pits and enormous iron pots, who ladle out beef stew, boiled potatoes, and thick slices of bread with real butter. Their plates are heavy. Their portions are large. You've watched them toss food away after barely touching it. You've seen meat land in the mud and stay there, uneaten, while you gnaw through another bowl of plain rice and try not to think about protein. One time, Someone in your camp tried to trade for leftover stew. The cook laughed, called him vermin, and threw the bones into the fire. They complain about the smell of your food, not to your face, rarely that bold, but loudly enough that you hear them. Stinks like rot, one of them muttered, waving smoke away as if it were a personal insult. Another joked that you were boiling rats. You said nothing, because saying something is dangerous. You laughed quietly, because not laughing is dangerous too. You're learning to navigate this line between response and silence, between pride and self-preservation. It's a kind of cooking all its own, the slow burn of everything you swallow that isn't food. Food fights occasionally break out, though no one calls them that. They're brief, brutal scuffles over stolen rice, accusations whispered too loudly, or the sudden discovery that someone's week's worth of dried fish has gone missing. There are no investigations, no apologies, just bruises and silence and the knowledge that tomorrow it might be you. You hide your food in your bedding now, wrapped in layers of cloth and tucked under your straw mat. You sleep with one hand over it. Not because you're greedy, but because hunger makes thieves of men who once shared stories, and rice without counting bites. The irony is that compared to the white workers, your diet is probably cleaner. You boil everything. You don't eat spoiled beef or drink sour milk. You rarely touch alcohol. Your stomach adjusts because it must. You hear them complain about coolie food, about the stink and the smoke, about how you're too cheap to eat real meat. And then you watch them puke behind the latrines after a night of bad stew and rot-gut whiskey. You don't say anything. You just keep boiling your water. Still, there's no pretending this is enough. Your belly stays hollow more often than not. The rice fills space, but not completely. The fish adds salt, but little else. You get dizzy when you stand up too fast. Your joints ache even when you haven't been working. Your nails grow brittle. Your gums bleed when you brush too hard. You don't talk about it. No one does. Hunger is impolite. It reminds everyone how close they are to the edge. Once someone passed around a peach. A real one, fresh, bruised, and impossibly fragrant. It had cost him 2 days' wages from a travelling merchant. He cut it into slivers with a rusted knife and shared it with 8 other men. Each slice was no more than a mouthful, but it was the only sweet thing you'd tasted in weeks. You remember that peach more clearly than some of the men who died. Its softness, its warmth from the sun, its total and utter absurdity. That moment was the closest thing to joy you felt since the work began, and it lasted less than a minute. Tonight, it's just rice again. You chew slowly, swallowing between winces. A piece of fish bone sticks briefly in your throat. You cough it loose and keep eating. When the bowl is empty, you scrape it clean with your fingers, lick them dry, and then sit for a while, staring into the ashes where the fire used to be. There's nothing left to do. You lie down on your straw mat, curling onto your side. The ground is cold, your clothes are still damp. Your belly is half full, enough to keep the worst hunger at bay, but not enough to sleep comfortably. Your gut gurgles, you clutch it gently. Not to soothe, but to hold it in place. The cramps feel like someone carving your insides with a dull spoon. You press your knees to your chest, fold your arms, and pretend it's enough. Your dignity, if it ever had a seat at this table, has long since left the room. Then morning comes, and with it, the sounds. Boots crunching outside, coughs tearing through the tent wall, the hiss of something boiling, and the first shout of the day, loud, impatient, and already angry. You rise slowly, bones stiff, back aching, and hands still sore from the night before. And that's when you remember what's waiting. The rocks, the slopes, the tunnels, the charges. You boil your water, you lace your boots, you say nothing. Because in this place, the only thing more constant than hunger is death. It starts with a noise, always a noise. A sharp crack, a deep rumble, a sudden wet thud that cuts through the rhythm of labour like a knife through cloth. You flinch before you understand what you've heard. Then you look, and by the time your eyes find the source, it's already too late. A man has vanished into a trench, or under a rock, or inside a tunnel that seconds ago was holding itself together through nothing more than stubborn geometry. There's no warning, no cinematic collapse, no time to shout a name or throw a rope. Just a sound, a beat of silence, and then absence. Accidents are not exceptional here. They're routine, a natural part of the day like lunch or sunset. The foreman called them unfortunate, as though gravity itself had a personal grudge. But the real cause is always the same: speed, cost, and the unspoken rule that your safety is not worth slowing down the work. You're told where to dig and how fast to dig it, but not how to stay alive while doing it. That part is apparently your responsibility, even though the tools are cracked, the instructions are vague, and the rocks above your head shift more than they should. You've learned to recognize the signs. A creaking groan from the tunnel wall. A sudden gust of cold air from a direction it shouldn't be coming. The way dust dances in the beam of a lantern just before the ceiling gives way. You try to warn others when you see these things, but sometimes they don't hear you. Sometimes they do, but keep working anyway. There's always pressure, from above, from behind, from inside. A man who stops gets yelled at. A man who yells too often gets moved. No one wants to be moved. That's where the real danger lives. The worst are the explosions. You don't light the fuses, but you drill the holes they're stuffed into. You know how the black powder smells, how it coats everything in a sickly sweetness that settles in your nose and makes you dream of fire. You've timed enough blasts to know when something is off, when a fuse burns too quickly, or a charge doesn't detonate at all. A dud, they call it. You still have to dig it out, very carefully, like poking a sleeping tiger with a stick and hoping it's dead. And if it isn't, well, then it's not your problem anymore. One morning your friend Lim disappears. You were working beside him, both of you shoulder deep in a blasted out wall of gravel and fractured granite. He was humming a song under his breath, something you hadn't heard in years, something from home. You meant to ask him what it was. Then the fuse lit. You both stepped back, but not far enough. The charge went off early, just a breath too soon. You were knocked backward. Your ears rang. Dust filled your lungs. When it cleared, he was gone. Just gone. They never found his body. Just part of a boot, a strip of cloth, and a shovel still leaning against a rock, as if waiting for him to come back and pick it up. No marker, no ceremony. The translator muttered something about reporting it to the company. The foreman didn't look up from his clipboard. You stared at that shovel for the rest of the day, unable to decide whether to move it or leave it. Eventually, someone else took it. You didn't ask who, it didn't matter. The ground itself is against you. Loose stone crumbles under your boots. Mudslides pull men into ravines too steep to climb out of. Ice forms in shaded cracks, invisible until someone's foot slips and they vanish down a slope with a sound like broken branches. You've seen it happen from a distance. One moment, a figure is there. The next, it's just space. Sometimes you hear them screaming as they fall. Sometimes not. You never see them again either way. Weather is not an inconvenience out here, it's a weapon. The rain turns everything to slime. The snow disguises holes and soft spots until your leg punches through into freezing water. In the higher elevations, blizzards arrive like armies, sudden, overwhelming, and hostile. Visibility drops to arm's length. The wind howls like it's trying to peel the skin from your bones. You can't see the man beside you, but you can feel the rope connecting you both tremble when he slips. If it goes slack, you don't check. You just keep walking. The tunnels are the worst. Carving through mountain feels like crawling into the earth's mouth and daring it to chew. The air is stale, wet, filled with dust that settles in your lungs and never quite leaves. You breathe in grit with every gasp. The walls drip water that stinks of minerals and rot. Wooden supports groan constantly, shifting as the mountain settles above you. You've felt them tremble. Watch the ceiling sag just enough to make you pause, then crack open without warning. When a tunnel collapses, there's no heroism, no time to dig someone out, no clever escape, just a thunderous crash and then silence. You freeze, wait for more to fall, and then slowly exhale when it doesn't. You don't shout for survivors. That's not how this works. If they made it out, they'll crawl back covered in blood and dust. If they didn't, well, they're part of the mountain now. The foremen treat death as an inconvenience. When someone dies, the crew pauses just long enough to drag the body out of the way. Sometimes they don't even do that. They just work around it. You once spent a full shift digging beside a bloodstain that never quite dried. The dirt kept drinking it. You didn't look at it. You just kept shoveling. It was easier that way. You've learned to ignore the sounds, the scream that cuts off too quickly, the shout for help that no one answers, the crunch of bone beneath rock, the wet slap of a man hitting the ground from too high up. You file them away in some corner of your brain that no longer flinches. You don't think about the man himself, just his hands maybe, his boots, what's left behind. That's easier too. You've also learned the art of denial. You tell yourself that the man who vanished yesterday might have just left camp, that the man who stopped coughing might have been reassigned, that the shovel sitting alone against the boulder is just extra. It's not true, but it helps you move. And moving is the only thing that keeps you alive. No one mourns openly. Grief is a risk. Let it show and you slow down. Slow down and you get noticed. Get noticed and you get replaced. So you press it down. The sadness, the guilt, the raw, acidic helplessness. You bury it in your belly beside the hunger and pretend it's just another kind of cramp. If someone asks you what's wrong, which they won't, you shrug. If someone looks at you too long, you look away. At night, you lie awake and replay the sound of the explosion, the way the air sucked in before it blasted outward, the way the dust filled the world, the way Lim's song stopped mid-note. You never even got to ask him what it meant. That somehow hurts more than the missing body, more than the boot, more than the shovel. The snow starts to fall again. Not gently, not beautifully, just a steady, relentless sheet of cold that settles into every gap in the tent canvas. It melts against your cheeks as you stare at the roof. You tell yourself it's just the snow, that your face is only wet because of the weather. But your breath shakes when you exhale, and your hands won't stop trembling. You curl onto your side, pull the blanket tighter, and clench your teeth against the sound you're afraid might come out. You can't tell if your face is wet from the snow or from the crying you've trained yourself not to do. If the mountain doesn't kill you, the men might. Not directly, of course, not with guns or blades or anything dramatic. That would require effort, and the white workers aren't always interested in effort when cruelty will do. Their hostility is quieter than an ambush, but more constant than hunger. It seeps into the way they look at you, speak around you, move past you like you're a stench they've learned to tolerate, but never quite forget. Some call you John because they don't care to remember your name. Others call you Rat because that's what you represent to them. Something small, sneaky, and unworthy of kindness. You've been called worse, but never with such casual repetition. They don't see you as competition. They see you as an infestation. That's what makes it worse. You're not just a problem. You're the reason their pay hasn't gone up, their food's gone bad, or their boots don't fit right. You're the scapegoat they can see, which makes you infinitely more useful than the foreman they're too afraid to challenge. They mutter about how Chinamen are ruining the job market, while they collect twice your pay and sleep in tents that don't leak. You build more track, haul more stone, and get less food, but still, they treat you like you're stealing something from them. Like you're cheating just by surviving. They don't share tools. That's one of the first things you learn. The shovels, hammers, and drills they use are jealously guarded, passed between them like relics. If you touch one, even by mistake, there's a scene. Raised voices, shouts in a language you don't fully grasp, but understand all the same. So you build your own. You find scrap metal and shape it with patience, lash handles together with wire and rawhide. The tools aren't good, but they work. Barely. You sharpen them on rocks, patch them with twine, and pray they hold together for one more day. They usually don't. But at least when they fail, it's your problem alone. They start fights and blame you. A shove here, a trip there, a fist swung just low enough not to be seen by a supervisor. If you defend yourself, even once, you're called aggressive, dangerous. They circle you in groups and make noises you're supposed to recognize as words. Sometimes it's mocking, sometimes it's threats, sometimes it's both. If you ignore them, they escalate. If you speak, they laugh. If you retaliate, they lie. You've seen a man dragged off and beaten bloody after being accused of attacking someone who insulted his mother in English he didn't even understand. No one translated the insult. No one questioned the accuser. The bruises were evidence enough. You stop making eye contact. It's not cowardice, it's survival. Looking them in the face feels like a challenge, like a provocation, like you're daring them to remember you exist. So you lower your gaze, nod politely when necessary, and keep your footsteps soft when walking past their camp. You don't stand tall, you don't walk fast, you make yourself smaller, not because you are, but because it's safer. You know what they see when they look at you. Not a worker, not a man, just something foreign and fragile, like a porcelain dish they'd rather smash than understand. There's a hierarchy here, and you're not at the bottom. You're beneath it. You're not even part of the ladder. The Irish labourers, the German ones, even the white Americans from back east, they all fight among themselves, but when it comes to you, they agree. You're the outsider, the joke, the ghost in the corner they blame when anything goes wrong. The tent leaks? Must be because you used the water barrel wrong. Tools go missing? Clearly one of you snuck over in the night. Someone gets sick? Your cooking smells off? Maybe that's the cause. You've heard them talk about you in half sentences, laughing between slurs, spitting out guesses at your name with deliberate cruelty. One man imitates your accent when he thinks you're not listening. Another makes exaggerated bowing motions every time you pass. His friends wheezing with laughter, like it's the height of wit. You say nothing. Not because you don't feel the shame, but because you can't afford the consequences of reacting. Dignity is expensive here, so you pay for safety instead. Sometimes they test the line. They'll offer you a cigarette, a drink, a handshake, and when you reach for it, they pull back and laugh. Or worse, they actually give it to you, just to watch you hesitate. To see if you'll take what they've touched, to watch you squirm under their gaze. You never know if it's charity or a trap. Usually, it's both. You learn not to accept anything. You stop believing kindness is real unless it comes from someone who shares your hunger. The foremen don't stop the harassment. They laugh along, or they ignore it, or they step in only when it gets loud enough to draw attention from above. Then they scold both sides equally, as if you started it, as if being mocked and hit and blamed is the same thing as responding. You get the same punishment as your attacker, or worse. After all, you're the one whose behaviour they're already watching. You're the one they expect to fail. Even when no one's looking at you, you feel it. The tension, the assumption that you're doing something wrong just by existing. You walk past the white camp and smell their food, meat, butter, bread, and you feel eyes crawl over your back like lice. You don't speed up, you don't slow down, you just keep walking. One of them spits in the dirt near your feet, just loud enough for you to hear. You don't flinch, you've trained yourself not to. You don't pray for their respect anymore. That was something you shed in the first few weeks, like your name and your accent and your old understanding of fairness. What you want now is invisibility, to pass through the world without being noticed, because when they notice you, they remember they hate you. When they remember they hate you, someone gets hurt. You can't afford to be that someone. Not when the mountain's already trying to kill you. Not when the company couldn't care less if you disappear. There are good ones maybe, or ones who aren't actively cruel, but you don't have time to find them. And even if you did, what would you say? What would they hear? Your language is silence now. You don't explain yourself to people who see you as an inconvenience. You save your words for your brothers, the ones who sleep beside you in the tent, who share their boiled rice and stale tea without asking questions. The ones who know that kindness doesn't require an audience. Sometimes late at night, you think about what might have been different if you'd been born somewhere else, if you'd spoken the right words, looked the right way, had the right skin, but the thought dies quickly. You're too tired for hypotheticals, too sore, too familiar with the weight of being othered. This is your reality now. Your back bent under rock, your breath short from cold, your eyes fixed on the dirt. And so, when another white worker walks past and spits near your boots, not on them, just near enough to make sure you noticed, you don't respond. Not with a word, not with a glance. You stare ahead, unmoving, because that's safer than being noticed. And safer, here, is always better than proud. You were promised $30 a month. It sounded like salvation when you first heard it. More money than most people back home ever saw in a year. Enough to send to your family, to pay off debts, to maybe return with your dignity, not just intact but upgraded. You pictured yourself standing taller, buying meat for your parents, new shoes for your brother, perhaps even getting married. $30. It was supposed to be your lifeline, but by the time the first pay came, it had already become something else. A trick, a ghost, a whisper of what might have been. The company keeps records, of course, neatly scrawled ledgers, full of deductions and fees and fine print you never signed, but somehow agreed to the moment you picked up a shovel. You're not handed money. You're handed a summary, a slip of paper, if they even bother, listing your total earnings, and then subtracting them line by line, until all that remains is an insult, wrapped in the word balance. That first month, you were supposed to get 30. You got 20, or so they said. They didn't explain. You didn't ask. You're charged for everything. Tools rented, never mind that they were cracked when you got them, and worse when you returned them. The price doesn't drop with the condition. Bedding? That filthy straw mat crawling with lice? You paid for that too. Not just once either, every month. As though someone sneaks in at night and replaces it with something new, which you know for a fact they don't. Food? Technically not deducted, but good luck cooking if you don't buy your own rice and kindling from the company store, which somehow always costs more than it would in town. Not that you're allowed to go to town. And medicine? Not covered. When you twist your ankle hauling a wheelbarrow through wet gravel, you're given a rag and told to rest it overnight. If you get a fever, they tell you to drink hot water. If a tooth rots, you pull it yourself or live with the pain. A man once coughed blood onto his shirt for 3 days before collapsing. He didn't get a doctor. He got moved to a quieter tent. You visited him once. He looked like a dying candle. Thin, flickering, still trying to burn. You tried to send word to his family, but he didn't have an address, just a name. One the company never bothered to record. Some months your pay is less than 20. One time it was 16. They said the supply cart was delayed, and the camp had to source food from a different vendor. Higher costs, passed down. You learned that phrase from a translator who seemed embarrassed as he said it. Passed down. Like misery was just another item on the invoice. You watched one man go weeks without pay because he lost a pickaxe. The handle broke mid-swing and the head flew off a cliff. They docked him the full cost and then some, including a new head, a new handle, and labour time spent investigating. He didn't speak for a week afterward, just stared into the fire, blinking like he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. You don't argue, you've learned not to. The last man who did, loud, righteous, fists clenched, found himself reassigned to a cliffside blasting job 2 days later. No one survives long on that crew. He didn't either. The official story was accident, but no one really believed it. You looked at the spot he'd slept. now occupied by another unlucky arrival, and you didn't say a word. You folded your complaint into the same corner of your stomach, where you keep your hunger, your anger, and the memory of your own name. You keep sending money home, what little you can, folded carefully into letters that are read, censored, and sometimes never arrive. You don't tell your family how bad it is. You write about the weather, about the progress of the tracks. You make jokes about your clumsy feet and the odd customs of white workers. You don't mention the deaths. You don't say what's been taken from you. You say you're grateful, because if they knew the truth, that you're working yourself into the ground for pennies and punishment, it would break them. So you lie with ink and paper and hope the envelope doesn't get stolen before it reaches the dock. Sometimes you ask yourself where the money even goes. You don't see it. You don't feel it. You never hold it in your hand. It doesn't line your pockets or build your future. It drips away, coin by coin, into hands that never touch a shovel, into the pockets of men who wouldn't last a day doing your job. You once saw a company official ride through camp on a horse, so well fed it looked insulted to be among humans. His coat had buttons shinier than your cooking pot. He didn't look at you, not once, but you knew, somehow instinctively, that he made more in a day than you would in a year, and that no one would ever make him prove it. To keep what little pay you do get, you've developed tricks. You hide coins in your sock, in your rolled blanket, under a stone you placed yourself, carefully marked with a scratch only you would recognise. Some men sew theirs into the hems of their shirts, others bury them, though those have a way of disappearing. Theft isn't common, but it's not unheard of. Desperation does strange things to otherwise honest people, and there's always the risk of a search. The foremen don't need a reason. They check beds at random, claiming they're looking for weapons or contraband. Sometimes they just want to remind you whose camp this really is. When payday comes, no one celebrates. There's no laughter, no counting of coins, no excited chatter about how close someone is to going home. It's quiet, suspicious. You open your envelope, if you're lucky enough to get one, and scan the figures like a man studying a verdict. You nod once, you fold it, you put it away, you don't talk about it. You've seen men beaten just for complaining too loudly about deductions. You've seen others move to night shifts as punishment. There's a lesson in every silence here. The translator once told you that the company doesn't like financial agitation. That was the phrase. Like fairness is a disease that spreads if you breathe too hard around it. You looked at him and said nothing. You just wondered quietly what he sees in the mirror. A bridge between two worlds, or just a man who stopped fighting because he got tired of losing. At night, you pull the coins from your sock and count them by firelight. The metal is warm from your skin. It smells faintly of sweat and soot. You rub your thumb across the faces stamped into them. Men you'll never meet, presidents and generals who would not have called you human. You count slowly, carefully, as if touching money too quickly will make it vanish. 1, 2, 3. Not enough for a ticket home. Not enough for a doctor. Barely enough for rice and postage. Still, you count. You place each coin back into your sock with the same reverence you once gave to prayer. You hide it beneath your bedding and lie down, staring at the tent ceiling, listening to the wind scrape across the canvas. You wonder if your family will believe you when you tell them you're doing fine. You wonder if they'll ever know what it cost to send so little. Outside, someone is arguing. Another man's pay came short, again. Voices rise, then fall. Footsteps retreat. No one's reassigned. Not yet. You roll onto your side, feeling the shape of the coins against your ankle. They jingle slightly as you shift. A quiet, metallic betrayal. The rocks may break your back, but it's the sickness that does the real damage. Slowly, quietly, without spectacle. The injuries are at least honest. A broken bone is visible, immediate, and earned. But the illnesses come like thieves, creeping into your lungs, your gut, your blood, and making themselves comfortable. By the time you notice them, they've already unpacked. And out here, there's nothing to throw them out with. No medicine, no help, just a battered teapot, a strip of cloth, and whatever roots someone remembered to dry back when hope was still something people planned for. You've seen men fall to cholera so quickly, it felt like magic. Some cursed transformation where a man laughing over rice in the morning is curled in the dirt by nightfall, clutching his stomach and begging for water he won't be able to hold. You've seen the puddles beneath him, thin and pale, like the sickness is wringing his soul out through his bowels. Dysentery isn't better, just slower, more spiteful. The dehydration twists their fingers, hollows their cheeks, makes their skin look like old paper stretched over bone. When they go dry. There's not even enough left to cry. Frostbite is crueler. It doesn't even pretend to be a disease, just punishment for not being rich enough to afford boots that hold together. It starts at the toes, biting through the holes in your socks, turning skin grey and stiff. Then the pain stops, which is worse. That means the nerves are dying. The first man you saw with it tried to laugh it off. He tapped his foot against a rock and said, "Doesn't hurt at all, like it was a trick." 2 days later, his toes came off with the sock. He didn't talk much after that, but nothing outstays its welcome like tuberculosis. Consumption, the white men call it. A word that sounds poetic if you've never seen someone cough their lungs out onto their blanket. The disease eats slowly, starts with a tickle in the throat, then a rasp, then a hack so deep it sounds like someone trying to dig their way out from the inside. The blood comes last, dark, stringy, coughed into rags or onto sleeves, or into open palms, with a look of confused horror, as if the body didn't realise it had given up until it was too late. You've seen strong men crumble, men who swung pickaxes harder than anyone, who climbed with frostbitten fingers and didn't complain when their meals went missing. They rot from the inside out, and they know it. That's the worst part. Watching them know. There are no doctors for you, not in your camp. The white workers might get a visit from a company physician, a man with a moustache, a flask, and a very large thermometer he uses like a magic wand to justify sending men back to work. But you don't even get that. If someone gets sick, the foreman shrugs and says, "Keep him warm," or "boil the water." If it looks contagious, they might drag the man outside and tell him not to come back until he's better. Sometimes they just don't say anything at all. A sickness isn't a reason to stop working. It's just an inconvenience to work around. Herbs are the closest thing you have to medicine. Dried leaves from home, wrapped in cloth and hidden in the folds of blankets like contraband. Sometimes they help. More often they don't. A man once brought a paste for fevers, something his grandfather made with bark and vinegar. He smeared it on his chest and claimed it made the coughing lighter. That night, he choked in his sleep. His bunkmate woke up covered in blood. The translator said something about bad luck and told everyone to boil their socks. No one argued. The foreman blames you, blames all of you. Says you're sick because you don't bathe enough, because you eat strange food, because you breathe wrong. You listen without speaking. You've learned there's no winning that argument. You could tell him there's no clean water, that the latrine collapsed in last week's rainstorm and no one fixed it, that the food you eat is the only food you're allowed to buy, but it wouldn't matter. You're dirty by definition, filthy by presence, diseased by existence. The fault will always be yours. When someone dies, and someone always dies, you don't stop working. You just shift schedules, make room in the tent, adjust the count. Burial happens at dawn before the real labour starts, when the light is low and the wind hasn't yet picked up enough to sting your face. You dig shallow graves with the same shovels used to clear rock. There's no ceremony, no priest, just a few muttered words. Sometimes, in a dialect not everyone understands, and a name scratched into a stick or a stone, or more often, the dirt itself. The names wash away in the next rain. You buried Jin last week. He was young, quick with a joke, knew a dozen riddles and never gave up the answer, unless you guessed 3 times. When he started coughing, He tried to hide it, pressing his sleeve to his mouth, pretending it was just the dust. It wasn't. Within days, he was spitting red. Within a week, he couldn't get out of bed. The translator said he was faking it, said he was just tired. By the time they believed him, he couldn't speak. You carried him outside on a blanket. He was cold before you finished saying his name. You don't know how many men you've buried. Not exactly. You stopped counting after the 10th. The graves are close together now, tucked into the slope beside the camp where the soil's soft enough to dig. Someone tried to make markers out of old tool handles. Another man carved initials into stones with a nail. Most are just mounds of earth. Even those don't last long. The rain flattens them. The wind scatters what's left. One morning, you saw a dog digging at the base of one. You threw rocks at it until it ran. It came back the next night. No one cries, not where anyone can see. Grief is treated like weakness, like illness, contagious, unproductive. You feel it, you all do, but it stays inside, behind clenched jaws and downcast eyes. You don't talk about the ones you've lost. You just refer to their beds in the past tense and carry on. Sometimes, if you're lucky, someone makes a joke about a dead man snoring, or the way he always fell asleep mid-sentence. You laugh softly, not because it's funny, because remembering he existed feels like defiance. You try not to think about who's next, but you know the signs. You hear the coughs during dinner, the long silences at night, the hesitation in someone's step as they carry their shovel. You notice when someone skips a meal, when someone sleeps later than usual, when someone stares at their hands too long. You keep track quietly. You don't say anything. You just watch. One night, you wake to the sound of your own breathing. It's uneven, rough. There's a weight in your chest, not pain exactly, but heaviness. Like something settled there in the dark and refuses to move. You clear your throat. It doesn't help. You cough once, twice. Something thick comes up. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve and taste copper. You tell yourself it's nothing, that the air is just cold, that the dust is thicker than usual. You don't talk about the sickness, not because it's rare, but because it's everywhere. It lingers in the tents, rides on the wind, settles into the cracks of your coughs and the hollow of your cheeks. Men die quietly now, no ceremony, no surprise. You bury them before breakfast and swing a pick before lunch. It becomes normal, which is the worst part. Not the pain, not the fear, the familiarity. It begins the way rebellion always does, with grief. A man in the next tent loses his closest friend, not to rockfall or frostbite, but to something quieter. A fever that didn't break, a cough that wouldn't stop. No one helped, no one came. The body was removed at dawn with the same efficiency you've come to expect from death here. No one said his name aloud, not the foreman, not the translator, not even his friend, who sat staring at the empty bedroll for hours, unmoving, while the others dressed for work. And when the whistle blew, he simply didn't get up. He wasn't loud about it. He didn't shout. He didn't raise a fist or curse the heavens. He just stayed seated, hands folded in his lap, eyes on the dirt floor, like he was waiting for someone who wasn't going to return. The foreman came eventually, flanked by two white workers with thick arms and faces set in the expression men wear when they're about to pretend something is their job. They told him to get up. He didn't. They asked again. He still didn't. They dragged him out of the tent and beat him so thoroughly that the blood soaked through the canvas wall. You heard every blow. You didn't move. They said it was for insubordination. Said you're not allowed to just stop. Not when there's track to lay. Not when there's money to be made. They brought him back after, or what was left of him. He couldn't stand, he didn't speak. He left the camp the next day on a cart headed west. They didn't say where, you didn't ask. No one else refused work after that. But someone did try to organise. Quietly, carefully, like a man tiptoeing through a nest of sleeping snakes. He was smart, knew a little English, could read, even wrote down what he thought were labour terms. in a small notebook he kept hidden in his boots. He talked to men during meal breaks, explained how many hours you worked, how much money was missing from your pay, asked if anyone else thought it was strange how many deaths were chalked up to natural causes. At first people listened. They nodded. Some even seemed to agree. Then just as suddenly he was gone. No one saw him leave. No one heard him say goodbye. His things were still in his tent, blanket folded, shoes neatly placed, notebook missing. The translator said he'd been reassigned. The foreman said he'd gone home. Both were lying. You could see it in their eyes. You checked the rock pile where you'd buried others. No sign of him. Just air and questions. You learned something then. Something sharp and cold and final. You can disappear here. Not slowly, not symbolically, but literally. You can be erased like chalk from a slate, and the work will go on without so much as a pause. You never thought of yourself as political. You didn't come here to argue. You came to earn, to survive, to send money back to people who needed it more than you. But even you once considered asking a question, just one, about why the white workers get Sundays off, and you don't. Why they have tents with stoves, and you freeze beside a damp fire pit. Why their meals come hot, and yours come raw. Why they get seen, and you get blamed. The question formed in your mouth one evening, quiet and casual, and you almost asked it. Then you remembered the man with the notebook. So you didn't ask, and you haven't asked anything since. Now you speak only when necessary, and even then briefly. You nod when ordered. You listen when scolded. You thank the translator for delivering your own instructions back to you in a language you can understand, as if you're supposed to be grateful for being given the chance to obey. You've learned that silence is not weakness, it's armor. That not knowing is sometimes safer than understanding. The less you say, the less you're seen. And the less you're seen, the more likely you are to keep waking up in the same bed every morning. Your mind quiets too. That's the part you didn't expect. At first, you used to think while you worked. About home. About your mother's hands peeling oranges. About the way the sunlight hit the rice fields in the late afternoon. About your sister laughing so hard she couldn't stand. Now you don't think much at all. You shovel. You swing. You carry. You eat. You sleep. The rhythm consumes the imagination. It dulls the senses until you forget there was anything else to remember. You stop asking when this will end. You used to count the weeks. Now you've stopped keeping track of the days. You used to tell yourself you'd leave when you saved enough. Now you don't even calculate what enough means. You used to pray, not devoutly, but with purpose. Now your prayers are mechanical, muttered phrases before sleep that even you know you don't mean. You're not waiting anymore. You're enduring. That's what this place turns you into. Not a fighter, not a dreamer, but a shape that continues moving because it hasn't been broken yet. Someone near you jokes about rebellion once. It's not serious, just a muttered comment about replacing the foreman with a goat and seeing if anyone notices. A few men laugh, one doesn't. He looks up, scans the camp, and then hisses something about watching your mouth. The laughter stops. Everyone goes back to eating. That's how thin the line is. One joke, one mistake, one wrong moment. And the mountain doesn't have to kill you. The system will do it instead. When the white workers strike, and they do, the company negotiates, sends representatives, adjusts schedules, promises better pay. They get Sundays off, thicker tents, stew with real meat. You watch from a distance as their demands are met and wonder what it feels like to believe you're worth the trouble, to have your anger taken seriously, to speak and not be punished for it. You think about the man with the notebook again, and then you bury the thought. Or now when someone dies, you say nothing. When someone disappears, you shrug. When someone's pay comes up short, you don't react. Because if you speak, you make yourself visible. And visibility is a risk. You don't want to be reassigned. You don't want to be made an example. You just want to keep your head down, your hands moving, and your name, or what's left of it, out of someone else's mouth. The silence spreads like smoke. The others stop talking too. Conversations become nods, jokes become glances. Meals are eaten quickly, mechanically, with heads down and eyes on bowls. Even the snoring at night seems quieter now, as if every man is trying not to draw attention, even in sleep. You don't mourn this change, you understand it. It means people are learning or giving up. Either way, it's safer. You've started to forget what your face looks like. There's no mirror in camp, no reflection in the stream darkened by soot and debris. The last time you caught your likeness in a patch of still water, you didn't recognize it. Sunken cheeks, cracked lips, eyes too far back in their sockets. Now, even that memory feels distant. You haven't seen yourself in weeks. You're not sure you'd recognize it anyway. Winter doesn't arrive with ceremony. It doesn't announce itself with soft snowflakes or scenic mornings. It hits, all at once, like a falling wall of stone. One night, you're huddled in a damp tent, wishing the wind would let up. The next morning, you wake to a world choked in white. Snow clogs the air, buries your tent ropes, freezes your boots solid. You stand in it up to your ankles before sunrise, and before you've had time to finish coughing the cold out of your lungs, someone's shouting at you to move faster. Your clothes aren't made for this. You were issued one shirt, one coat that stopped being warm sometime in October, and a pair of wool socks that haven't been dry in weeks. They gave you a second pair too, after they shrank in the wash. You wear both now, overlapping holes and praying they last through the next walk to the blasting site. Your scarf is an old rice sack someone cut into strips. Your gloves, if you're lucky enough to have any, are mismatched and fingerless. There's no such thing as insulation. There's only layering and the quiet knowledge that the cold will find a way in anyway. Boots are the worst. Yours leak at the sole. Every step through slush feels like dipping your toes into a grave. You pack straw into them, try to line them with rags, but nothing keeps the wet out. You've seen men try to dry their socks over the fire at night, only to fall asleep and wake to find one missing and the other half scorched. Frost clings to the seams of your trousers. Ice crusts your eyebrows. When the wind cuts through the camp, it lifts the edges of the tents like a hand peeling back a scab. You lie there at night with your teeth clenched, not from fear, but just to keep them from rattling against each other, like dice in a cup. The tents buckle under the weight of snow. You've lost count of how many collapsed. One came down in the middle of the night, snapping the centre pole and trapping 4 men beneath the canvas. No one died, but they came out shivering and pale, lips blue, fingers stiff. One didn't speak for 2 days. Another had to be carried to the fire pit and sat like a statue, unmoving, until someone forced him to sip hot water. After that, the men started sleeping in shifts, taking turns watching the tent walls for sagging. No one's gotten much rest since. The fires help, when they stay lit, but wet wood doesn't burn well, and what little dry kindling you have is often stolen or hoarded. You learn to guard fire like food. You hover over it, shield it with your back, feed it slivers of pine as if it's a living thing that needs convincing not to die. Even then, a gust of wind can kill it in seconds. You've cried once, just once, when a fire sputtered out after an hour of coaxing. The tears froze on your face before you could wipe them away. Work doesn't stop. It never does. You hike through snowdrifts to reach the tunnel. The mountain road becomes a narrow trench flanked by walls of ice where loose rock once stood. Your pickaxe clinks off frozen stone like it's punishing you for trying. Your shovel won't bite through the surface unless you break the frost layer first. Tools slip from numb hands. Nails turn purple. You can't feel your fingertips by midday, and still the foreman yells at you for slowing down. You don't answer. You save your breath for tasks that won't get you killed. Frostbite sets in without fanfare. You don't notice it at first, just tingling, then numbness, then a kind of black ache that doesn't throb so much as settle. You keep working. What else are you going to do? It's not like you can stop and explain to someone that your fingers are dying. When you finally take off your gloves that night, 3 of your fingertips are grey. 1 of them is hard. The translator winces when he sees. "Keep them warm," he says. "Rub snow on them." You don't have the energy to ask if that's real advice or just the best he could offer under the circumstances. They blacken over the next few days. The nail on your index finger turns loose. You cut it off with a pocket knife and grit your teeth. You don't scream. No one screams here. Screaming is for people who still believe someone might care. Eventually, the tip of that finger shrivels and cracks. It falls off while you're eating. You stare at it in your palm for a moment. This tiny, familiar piece of yourself. Then toss it into the fire and keep chewing. The foreman calls you a tough little bastard when he hears. Says it like a compliment, like it's something you should be proud of. You nod, smile even, because your teeth are chattering so violently that if you don't smile, they'll break themselves apart. He walks away whistling. You don't hear the tune. Your ears are too cold to work properly anymore. You've seen other men lose more. Toes mostly. A man in your tent wakes up one morning and can't stand. His foot is black, his leg red up to the knee. They wrap it in cloth and pretend that's treatment. 2 days later, he can't breathe. The fever cooks what the cold couldn't kill. You bury him with a pair of unmatched boots someone left behind last summer. You don't say his name. No one's sure how to pronounce it. You dream of heat sometimes. Not fires, yeah, you've seen too many die out. But sunlight, the kind that sits on your shoulders like a friend. That warm rice field you used to walk through as a child. The smell of steamed dumplings rising in a clay kitchen. You wake up from those dreams with your face pressed into straw and your breath puffing out in pale clouds. You hold the memory in your chest until it melts. The worst part isn't the pain, it's the understanding that the cold is indifferent, not cruel, just present. And the people who are supposed to manage it, the company men, the overseers, the world that sent you here, they're indifferent too. There are no coats issued, no new tents, no extra blankets. You hear that the white workers have been moved to lower ground for the season. You don't ask why. You already know. Your days are measured in firewood, and the number of times you have to stop walking to beat circulation back into your legs. Your nights are spent curled up like a child, arms wrapped around your knees, face buried in your own chest to trap whatever heat your body still remembers how to make. You've stopped hoping for comfort. Now, you just aim for survival. You take numbness over pain. You take pain over silence. You still show up every morning. Still swing your pick. Still haul frozen rock with stiff fingers and a shoulder that hasn't bent properly since November. Because there's nothing else. Because leaving isn't allowed. Because staying alive is the only rebellion left that doesn't cost extra. And on the coldest night of the season, when your fire dies out and the wind howls like it's calling your name, you sit in the darkness and really try to remember what warmth feels like, the sensation, the safety, the humanity, but it slips away the moment you reach for it. It's a memory now, like safety, like being human. Eventually, you're reassigned to tunnel duty, not because you volunteered or because you're particularly skilled, but because someone else died and a space opened up. That's how promotions work out here, by subtraction. One less body above ground means one more needed below. The foreman doesn't explain. He just gestures toward the slope with a nod, and the translator informs you, in a tone somewhere between apology and warning, that your new assignment begins immediately. You gather your tools and descend. The tunnel is a jagged mouth cut into the mountainside, wide enough for carts but shaped like something that was never meant to open. It's framed with timber braces that groan with every temperature shift, every gust of wind, every change in pressure that feels like it might be the one to bring the whole thing down. You step inside, and the light vanishes almost immediately. The air grows colder, thicker. It smells like rot and sweat and rock dust and oil. You breathe through your sleeve, and try not to think about how deep the blackness goes. Your job isn't complicated. You drill holes into the tunnel face, pack them with black powder, run fuses, retreat, wait, then listen for the explosion, always too loud, always too sudden, and return to clear what's left behind. Sometimes it's just rubble, sometimes it's not. You learn very quickly not to assume the tunnel is empty before you step inside. You've seen what happens when someone walks too early. A boot crushed flat. A shovel split down the middle. Once a chunk of skull the size of your fist, still wet and pink, lying next to a length of fuse that didn't burn all the way through. No one talks in the tunnel. Words feel wrong down here. There's no room for noise that isn't essential. The walls seem to absorb sound anyway, swallowing even the loudest voices and returning them as soft echoes of themselves. When someone drops a tool, the clang rings out like a scream. When someone coughs, everyone looks at them, not in concern, but in calculation. How long can he keep working? How soon will he slow us down? The dust never settles. It floats in the air like ash, clinging to your skin, coating your tongue, sinking into your lungs with every breath. You try to wrap a cloth over your mouth, but it dampens quickly from sweat and becomes harder to breathe through. You take it off. The coughing gets worse. Everyone coughs in the tunnel. It's part of the rhythm now. Pick, scrape, wheeze, repeat. You've seen men spit into the rock pile and leave red behind. No one mentions it. No one wants to see their own future in someone else's phlegm. There are lamps, but not many. Oil is expensive, and company supplies run short in winter. You carry a lantern when you can, but the flame flickers constantly in the drafts. Shadows shift along the walls, long and spidery, like the tunnel has things living in it that watch from the corners of your vision. You learn to work in semi-darkness, to feel your way with your feet and trust your instincts. You stop jumping at every noise. You stop imagining what it would be like to be buried alive. Eventually, you stop imagining at all. The collapses happen without warning. 1 minute you're drilling, and the next, the roof gives way with a roar that feels like a punishment. You hear the timbers crack, then scream, then split apart like snapped ribs. Stone crashes down in an avalanche of dust and splinters. You throw yourself to the ground, curl your arms over your head, and hope it isn't your turn. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is. When the noise stops, the silence afterward is worse. That's when you look around and start counting. You carry out the bodies by hand. There's no stretcher, no proper method, just a tarp, a blanket, whatever cloth hasn't been used for rags. You've lifted torsos with no legs, legs with no torsos. Once you found only a foot inside a boot. You brought it out anyway. The translator told you not to say anything. Just keep walking. It wasn't your job to ask whose it was. You don't always recognize the faces. The dust makes everyone look the same. Grey, empty-eyed. It's hard to tell who's dead and who's just exhausted. You stare longer than you should. Sometimes, trying to be sure. There's no time to dig proper graves, so you lay the pieces near the edge of camp, beneath tarps weighted with stones. If no one claims them, they stay there. A pile of limbs growing steadily beneath the winter sky. No markers, no names, just shapes, like discarded tools. Sometimes after a blast, you see things that don't make sense. Bones that don't belong to anyone from your camp. Old bones, from something long buried. A femur black with age. A jaw half embedded in rock. You don't ask what they mean. The foreman says to ignore them, that they're nothing. But you still think about them as you work. About what it means to dig through death to lay the bones of something new. About what will happen when someone else digs through you. The tunnel goes deeper each day. The deeper it goes, the less you remember the surface. You start to forget what the sky looks like, what real light feels like on your face. Time bends underground. Morning and night are reduced to lantern shifts. You work until someone tells you to stop. You eat by the mouth of the tunnel and go right back in. You sleep with your body aching in places you didn't know could hurt, then wake up and do it again. The surface becomes something you visit, not somewhere you live. You see less of the others now, even the ones you used to share fire with. Tunnel duty isolates you, not by policy, but by proximity. Your face is so coated in soot and stone dust that people flinch when they pass you. You no longer smell like sweat or food, just ash and fear. Your tent mates don't ask about your shift. You don't offer stories. If you spoke about what you saw in the tunnel, no one would believe you. Or worse, they would. You start forgetting words, not just in English, but your own. Simple things, the names for tools, for animals, for colours. You catch yourself staring at a flower growing near the riverbank, some stubborn thing sprouting through the rock, and you can't remember what it's called. You touch its petals just to make sure it's real. The softness startles you. Everything in the tunnel is sharp, cold, hard. You begin to doubt your memories of softness, of anything not carved from pain. One evening, during cleanup, you see something written on the tunnel wall in chalk. Not English, not Chinese, just a crude drawing, a face with hollow eyes and a mouth open wide. You don't know who drew it. It doesn't matter. You stare at it for a long time. Then you take your sleeve, wipe it clean, and go back to work. You finish your shift as always, hands numb, shoulders screaming, legs stiff, eyes half blind from darkness. The tunnel doesn't thank you. It never does. It just waits for you to return tomorrow. And you will. Because there's no exit, no promotion, no elsewhere. You drag yourself back toward camp with lungs full of stone dust and ears ringing like funeral bells. There's no countdown, no announcement, no final blast of dynamite or speech declaring the labour finished. One morning you wake up, same as any other, boots stiff from the cold, shoulders aching from yesterday's shift, and find the foreman in an unusually good mood. He's whistling, smiling even. The translator calls for attention and reads off a short statement from the company. The line has reached its destination. The railroad is complete. That's all he says. Then he folds the paper, clears his throat, and adds, almost as an afterthought, that you'll be expected to clear out by the end of the week. You stand there for a moment, not sure if you've heard correctly. Finished? You look at the mountain you were meant to move, at the last stretch of rail, gleaming faintly in the weak sun, and wonder if this is what finished looks like. You'd always imagined something more, not celebration exactly, but closure. Instead, there's a shovel in your hand, dirt on your boots, and a foreman checking a list to make sure you're not one of the few they plan to keep for maintenance work. You're not. There's a photograph taken that afternoon. A company man rides in on a fresh horse, gathers the white workers at the head of the line, and arranges them for a commemorative picture. They stand in rows, smiling stiffly in coats you've never seen them wear before, clean and pressed and far too fine for actual labour. You watch from a distance as they laugh, throw their arms around each other's shoulders, and shake hands like old friends. Someone brings out a bottle of whiskey. Another unfurls a flag. The photographer clicks the shutter. A moment is captured. You're not in it. None of you are. The Chinese labourers, the ones who laid the rails, cleared the tunnels, survived the snow and the rockfall and the dust, are told to stand aside. Not enough room, someone says. We'll take another later. They don't. The photograph will make it into newspapers, into history books. It will become the image of accomplishment, of manifest destiny, of progress. Your absence in it will not be noted. It will be assumed. There's no thank you, no pay bonus, no handshake or clap on the shoulder. Just a muttered, "You're done here," and the suggestion that there may be more work east or south, or wherever men like you are still tolerated for the price of their blood. A few ask where to go next. The translator shrugs. You'll have to find out. The company has no more use for you. You are a tool. And now the tool is put down. The camp begins to empty almost immediately. Men pack their things into whatever they can carry. cloth bundles, rice sacks, patched backpacks. Some argue over directions. Others sit in silence, staring at the dirt like they're waiting for it to speak. A few light fires, not for warmth, but to burn what they won't carry. You watch a man toss his bedding into the flames. Another drops his pickaxe into the river and walks away without looking back. You understand both impulses. Your own belongings fit into a cloth bundle the size of a pillow. A spare shirt, a spoon, a few coins in the lining, a small pouch of dried herbs you haven't dared to use. You add a folded letter from home, the last one you received weeks ago with the edges worn and the characters beginning to blur. You can't bring much, you don't have much. Everything you've earned, you've already sent away or lost. You stop by the graves before you leave. Not all of them, there are too many now, but a few. The ones you helped dig, the ones you remember. The markers are gone on most, the names washed away. You scratch a fresh one into the dirt with your boot heel, just to remind yourself that someone once mattered here. That someone died for a railroad they wouldn't be allowed to ride. The foreman comes by later, nudges your sleeping mat with the toe of his boot. Time to go, he mutters. He doesn't look at you. He's already thinking about the next job, the next crew, the next stretch of land that needs breaking. You nod, not because he deserves it, but because you're tired. Too tired to argue. Too tired to remember what defiance feels like. You start walking. There's no send-off, no farewell, just the crunch of your boots on gravel and the distant echo of the train you helped build, already rolling across the land like it owns the place. You don't have a ticket. You wouldn't be allowed on anyway. The tracks don't belong to you. They never did. The others spread out. Some head toward the towns, hoping for work. Others talk about heading back to San Francisco, trying to get on ships, maybe returning home. You don't know where you're going. You only know you have to leave. You pass the burned out shell of the cook tent, the battered supply shack, the place where the tunnel mouth still gapes like a wound in the earth. You don't stop. You don't look back. No one calls your name. No one asks where you're headed. No one even checks to see if you're gone. You could vanish now, and it would change nothing. The track is laid. The photo is taken. The story has already been told without you in it. You walk past a white family at a crossing point. A man, a woman, 2 children. They stare at you like you're part of the scenery, something they expected to see but don't want to acknowledge. The woman pulls her daughter closer. The man adjusts his coat. You keep walking. You've gotten good at that. The road stretches ahead, long, dusty, indifferent. You walk with your bundle slung over your shoulder and your hands shoved deep into your sleeves. The sun beats down, but it doesn't warm you. The cold has settled deeper than your skin, somewhere unreachable, somewhere permanent. You think about the railroad, the miles of track you laid, the mountains you dug through, the bridges you helped raise, the tunnels you nearly died inside, all of it behind you now, none of it bearing your name. There will be plaques someday, monuments, museums, but they won't mention the shovel you carried, the fingers you lost, the songs you used to hum before your throat turned to dust. You walk on, past the last outpost, past the edge of the map, into the blank space that swallows all the names no one bothered to write down. No one asks your name. No one will remember it. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. Heavy, thankless, and quietly lost beneath iron rails and American amnesia. If you're still awake, thank you for making the long, cold walk through a life built with broken hands and erased from the record. If you'd like early access to more slow descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other forgotten corners of history you'd like to see covered. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers Andrew S. and Amanda Lamke. Sleep well.